Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Illinois House of Representatives Virtual Job Fair. Today, we will be hearing from 5 presenters hiring for various positions within the Office of the Speaker, as well as the Office of the Clerk. If you have questions at any time, please type them into the chat and we will address them during the Q&A session that will be taking place after all presentations have concluded. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available on the Illinois workNet YouTube channel for you to refer to later. Now I am pleased to introduce Pamela with the Illinois House of Representatives, Office of the Speaker. Pamela, feel free to take things away. And Pamela, you are muted. I have asked you to unmute, so just make sure you accept that prompt.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for coming to our second annual virtual job fair for the Illinois House of Representatives. We appreciate your interest and we hope to give you some information about us and our work. So the presenters for the day will be James Hartman, who is our Chief Counsel to the Speaker, Mark Jarmer, who is the Director of Research and Appropriations Unit, myself, Pam Lassiter, the HR Director and EEO Officer, Stephanie Miller, who is our Operations Manager in our Legislative Unit, John Holman, who is the Clerk of the House, and John Maxson, who is the Director of Communications. I believe supporting John today will be David Stevens. So we will have David as well. Next slide.
And Pamela, just want to be sure, were you able to see the agenda slide on the screen?
Yes, I can. Should
Okay.
I announce next slide or?
Absolutely, yeah, if you would. Please.
Okay. Okay. So to give you some insight into where we'll go today, here is our agenda. We'll talk about the structure of the General Assembly. We'll give you a brief overview of the legislative process. We'll talk about the Office of the Clerk and the structures and the functions within that. We will talk about the Office of the Speaker and the structure and functions within that. And we intend to allow time for questions and discussion at the end. Next slide. So we think it is very important to understand where we come from as an organization. So we wanted to talk a minute about what is our organizational mission, and within it, this concept of what we're trying to build here. I think the last 3 bullets are the most important. So as we come together thinking about these goals, we want to be mindful of always acting with transparency and accountability. We want to show loyalty to our teammates, and we always are standing against prejudice and hate. So these are kind of our core values and our mission within the Office of the Speaker. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So our core values. Our core values are these handful of items here. Always maintain professional and ethical conduct at all times, embrace teamwork and collaboration to accomplish our goals, demonstrate respect and kindness for ourselves and for others, display openness to the opportunities that change and new ideas that you can bring, recognize that inclusivity leads to creative ideas and innovation, work always towards improving efficiency and the effectiveness of outputs, commit to a continuous learning environment, and provide support to others in their demonstration of these values. So these are the core values that we try and live with, along with our mission, vision, and values. It's kind kind of our template for the environment we're creating. Next slide.
I am Speaker of the House, Emmanuel Chris Welch. It's the people behind the elected officials that really make a difference. We're only as good as the staff around us. And so I believe in hiring good people, staying out of their way, and let them do their job. Whenever you go into something, you should always start with your why. Why do you do what you do? Why do you wake up in the morning? What drives you, and why does it drive you? And I think if you answer that question, it would drive you to working in a place like the Speaker's office, because you get to help a whole lot of people in a whole lot of different areas. Every single day we go to work, we have an opportunity to change somebody's life. Things we do in the legislature impact someone's daily life every single day. Well, I think we're all better when we all understand each other. Diversity, equity, and inclusion certainly allows us the opportunity to learn from one another. You need to know and understand each other to make better policy. And so having everyone at the table is always the best approach. It's a very inclusive and collaborative environment. It's a great place to work for those who have ideas and want to come in and share them in a team concept. There's no I in team, and that's the type of environment we're trying to drive. Everybody plays a role in this because we can do a whole lot of things when we're working together. Belief is to have a big tent, and under that big tent there's room for everybody. And you know, everybody includes people of different personalities. So don't knock it till you try it. Come on and apply for a job in the Speaker's office. I guarantee you, you'll love working here.
So let's spend some time talking about the structure of the General Assembly. We are bicameral, meaning we have two separate houses of governance. The Senate, that is divided into 59 districts, and the House, that is divided into 118. Two House districts are nested within each Senate district. House members are elected every 2 years. Senate members are elected on 2 or 4 year terms. So as an overview of the legislative process, some of the work we do, our primary duties and responsibilities include bills and other legislative measures to approve the state budget, raise or lower taxes, set levels of state spending, confirm gubernatorial appointments through the Senate, consider constitutional amendments that affect both federal and state. Our typical session runs January through May, and veto session is in the fall. For example, we had veto session this week. So we have the other piece of our office is the Office of the Clerk. It provides bipartisan administrative support. It includes such responsibilities as the journal room, committee clerks, E&E, which is enrolling and engrossing, as well as transcription. There's a fiscal office. We have legislative receptionists. We have a post office, and of course we have janitors. The Office of the Speaker is divided into pretty much 5 units. There is the Research and Appropriations Unit, the Technical Review Unit, which has our legal staff. We have the Legislative Unit. We have the Communications Unit. And then we kind of had the admin section, which includes the fiscal office, IT, HR, and leadership groups. So I will now turn it over to my partner, Mark Joner, the Director of Research and Appropriations.
Good day, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the presentation up to this point. I'm going to try to give you a pretty good taste of what it would be like to work in the RAU, or Research and Appropriations Unit. This is a unit comprised of about 10 to 15, sometimes as many as 18 analysts, depending upon the committee workload that we're under. As a generality in terms of background, I have staff that come from a very diverse field of undergraduate and to some extent graduate degrees. I don't really know that a political science degree would prepare anyone better than a finance degree, to be honest, because so much of what we do here is learning, diving into an issue to learn about it in depth on a short time frame, and then moving on to do it again, rinse and repeat over and over. Certainly, if you have some background in politics, if in your studies, that would be helpful. But I think that I would want to encourage any degree to apply. We are located here in Springfield, and I mentioned that because there are a lot of people from the city, and when we're not in session, they would have questions about that. The reason the RAU is located down here is because almost all of the people that we directly deal with in the governor's office, the Senate, and the regulated community, they have offices down here. And so I can meet face to face with my counterpart in the Senate or the director of GOMB very, very easily. And especially when we're negotiating the budget toward the end of session, it's paramount that we have those face-to-face contacts. So we are located here. Our offices are located on the 5th floor of the building, and our general schedule is different depending upon whether or not we are in session. So generally speaking, during session, we're here from 8:15 until about 6:30 at night. And then during the summer months, after we adjourn in May and until veto session in the fall, that changes to 8:30 to 4:30. So a good portion of the year, you're on a very gentle calendar or schedule. When you come in from May until October or November, you're on that 8:30 to 4:30 with an hour off for lunch grind. But the environment, I'm glad they put this bullet here, the environment changes radically between the two. During the summer months, we spend a lot of time researching difficult questions that we just don't have time to during session. So for example, each session we will, be faced with certain obstacles, pressures, or challenges in the budget world. And maybe we don't understand exactly what the systemic problem is that leads to that issue. During the summer months, that's where we'll take it apart. We'll go out to the agency, we'll sit down with folks, we'll really spend time digging through those sorts of things in preparation for the next year's budget. You also have that same amount of luxury on your substantive issues. Research and appropriations mean that my staff divides their time roughly 50-50 between appropriations work and substantive bills. Of all the substantive bills that are filed, James will, he probably has a number. I would just roughly say we split them about 50-50. And so, depending on, during the first year of a GA, we're going to get thousands of bills filed, to be sure. And that leads to an environment for my staff and for James's staff at the beginning of the year that really is quite pressureful. It's a busy time, and you're reading a lot of information, you're processing a lot of information, you're writing a lot. And so there's stress there. There's also stress because our job is very public facing. So we spend a lot of time in our offices, to be sure. I think there's this general perception we're up here with a very large abacus. Not true. But we do go down to the floor and assist members when they're taking bills through third reading. And we are in the committees. And between the tech review staff and my staff, we also run, give the advising on the parliamentary procedures to make sure that everything is conducted the way that it should be conducted. And so the environment can be very stressful, but I would tell you with absolute certainty There is not a job that you will learn government better. In a matter of about 3 or 4 years, and I think John Holman would say that this is definitely true. We'll ask him here in a second. But I think after you're about 5th or 6th year, you've earned a doctorate in political science, because you're going to be exposed to a lot of things, both within your areas of expertise, but also just peripherally, right? When the fair tax was moving, a lot of my analysts aren't around revenue or taxation, but they were very, very interested, and they had a front row seat, right? So you'll learn a lot that you can take with you when you go. Let me talk just briefly about the traits of an effective analyst. Curiosity is paramount. If you're the kind of person that doesn't really like to learn new information, you have kind of a micro focus, if you will, this probably is not going to be the most rewarding job for you. The kind of person that really flourishes in this world is the kind of person that is curious about lots of things and is okay with having to learn about very complicated subjects on a very short timeline, right? And so the broader your background and the more curious you are, I think you'll have resonance and touch points with a lot of legislation that will help you as you explain it, as you help craft and guide it through the process. You have to be a good listener. And I don't just mean that in the politically correct sense of, respect. I mean in the sense of really listening to what people say, but also what they don't. Because in our world, as in many, what somebody doesn't say is oftentimes more important than what they do. So being a good listener, picking up on details, and being able to communicate to a wide range of audiences. For, in the committee, you're muffled in your communication. We take a back seat as is appropriate. It's the members that are running everything. We're just making sure that everything operates as it should by procedure. So it's very hushed, and you have to be mindful of all the people around you that might be hearing some of the things that you're being asked to whisper to members. Then there's, when we're on the floor, and you could be televised or on the radio as you're assisting a member. We go out and give orientation speeches at a lot of universities. I send my staff out, for recruiting purposes. Or we did a couple of years ago when John Holman was still up here on the research staff, we did a traveling around the state to, discuss the budget with PowerPoints. So communication is huge, written and oral. Attention to detail is something that cannot be stressed enough. And, I've been fortunate enough in my lifetime to be in the military and to be a skydiver and a scuba diver. And all of those things had taught me that details matter, obviously. In our line of work here in the Capitol, reading through a bill takes attention to really focus on what is the meaning of the word in this context. Words have meaning. We all understand that. And lawyers make a living off of, providing a interpretation or a new interpretation or a reinterpretation of single words all the time. Fair, honest, clean. These words, when we put them into bills, all drinking water will be clean. Well, what does that mean? And it falls to staff to be very careful as bills are being written and amended and passed, that we are attentive to those details, in particular, how we might cause an unintended consequence with our legislation that nobody has even thought about yet. And we deal with that a lot in the form of a trailer bill, 1 or 2 years down the line, but that's not best practice, right? So we want to make sure that we're attentive to all the details, and that really, pardon me, that goes back to listening and communicating as well, because attention to detail means being attentive to both sides of the argument, right? There's a lot of partisanship in the country today, but really the people that, I don't know if anybody caught Mike Pence, the town hall that CNN put on the other night. I'm not a fan particularly of his politics, but he was very attentive in his listening to the people that were asking him questions. He came off very well in my view. And so I think that that's important to package it all into listening to both sides of the argument and not prejudicing your interpretation, your analysis by what you think a bill does, but by really listening and learning. And then finally, speaking truth to power is exceptionally important. I will give you an example, a generic example. Yesterday, I was involved with a meeting that involves, some principals in the House Democratic Caucus, and we were discussing an issue. And I could tell that the issue, the position of most people was to go a certain way. But I really felt that even if that's what we did, we needed to be mindful, or at least my job was to point out the potential pitfalls of that. And sometimes that takes courage, right? Especially if you're a younger staffer and you're in a room and everything seems to be moving in a certain direction and you see something that's wrong. We tell people all the time, post 9/11, see something, say something. Being willing to speak out in a tactful, polite, respectful way is important. I see that Anthony appears to have a question, and I know you said we will put those to the end. I just want to check in. Is that still the case?
I think we can go on and take the question.
Okay. Anthony, what's your question?
Well, my question was about how specifically do we go about calling out which errors? Do we cite them, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It really is circumstantial in that, let's say that a Republican has a bill that just is, it's a Marjorie Greene sort of piece of legislation, let's say. I would point out the difficulties with that legislation pretty plainly. If it was one of our members, I would probably write my analysis a little differently because, I don't want to offend one of our members, our House Democratic members, and there's no need to do that in the bill analysis. I can think of very few circumstances where going right to the sponsor and having a sit down with them and pointing out what your concerns are would not be very helpful. I think that's the best way to go about it in a sidebar conversation. Now, what I'm saying is, if you're in committee and you see something happening that is wrong, procedurally speaking, I mentioned earlier that we work with parliamentary procedure. If you see that something was done in violation of our policy or our procedures, it sometimes takes courage to, especially if they've moved off the vote and they're getting ready to recess the committee to call a chair and everybody's getting ready to leave. It takes, some courage to say, hey, everyone, I'm sorry. I just want to check something real quickly. Can we just press pause for a second while I check in with the lawyers or tech review or Mark or James? That is important that you're able to do that, is what I mean. Does that help explain that?
Yes, thank you. It gives me ideas, and it gives me, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I think there's more on the next slide that I'm speaking on. I think we're ready for that. Great. That picture up there is showing his back to you is Representative Crespo, I believe, and that's one of our former staffers, Madeline, who's gone on to she lobbies in the education world now, and that illustrates something I think that is very, very important. And we'll review these key responsibilities here in just a second, but the culmination of those puts you in a very, very advantaged position over other people that would want to apply for work as an in-house liaison, to liaise with the General Assembly and lobby their position, a state agency, a not-for-profit. I mean, if it's going to come to the legislature for either funding or regulation, it's going to need a liaison. And I am a firm believer that really popping the hood, checking the oil, as it were, of politics is done best by working inside one of the processes. So let's talk about what you would do. You're going to do a lot of research, and by development, what I mean is during the summer, I'm particularly bad about this. I will look at a problem that we've encountered over the last year or 2 or 3 or 10, and I'll get a couple people and we'll form a tiger team. We're doing one Monday, as a matter of fact, where we just look at a problem and brainstorm potential solutions. So we develop pathways, and who knows what our legislators will prefer, but our job is not to come up with, the one right answer. We need to come up with options that give our members the maximum flexibility to get a job done. You'll hear our speaker say over and over again, our strength is our diversity, our ability, and he said it in the video today, our ability to work with everyone and be inclusive with everyone's opinion. When we develop ideas, we are trying to develop them with that perspective in mind. Is it good for all people of the state of Illinois, or does it only help a certain subset, and if that's appropriate or not? In terms of drafting and preparation, the Legislative Research Bureau downstairs is comprised of a lot of lawyers and some non-lawyers. They're the ones that draft everything up into legislative form for us, assign it with a tracking number, etc. But we are responsible for the guts that go in. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there are times when, as an analyst, I'd gone down to LRB with a member's request. I had no idea how to get it done, and I basically walked in there with an idea and nothing else. But that's not best practice, and that we would try to keep that to a minimal, because those lawyers down there are drafting every bill that gets filed. So we talked earlier about a number like 3,000 in a GA. That's a lot of drafting, and we don't draft a bill once, right? We might draft that same concept 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times and then amend the hell out of it as we go through the process. So drafting is something we spend in this unit a lot of time preparing information analysis that can help us draft the best piece of legislation we can. And I would refer you back to my earlier comment about words having meaning. This is where you will really sharpen your skill as a writer from the perspective of law. James will tell you, writing as a lawyer, writing in statute is very, very different than writing in academia, and I know that from experience. And the drafting process is really a place where you sharpen your skills that you would use as a liaison later. Budget is something that we spend about, as I said, 50% of our time on, but it comes in phases. In February, per the Constitution, the governor promotes a budget. He introduces a budget for consideration. We spend the rest of session after February's release of that budget doing the analysis and building out of what we want the budget to look like. Of course, the governor, it's his prerogative to introduce these concepts and talk about his priorities, but the power of the purse belongs to the House and the Senate. And so really, we spend an awful lot of time reconstructing the introduced budget so that it gels with our priorities as the Democratic caucus in both the Senate and the House. The most labor-intensive time of the year is the month of May. During the month of May, you spend nearly all of your time on budget, and then concurrence is coming back to us from the Senate. In terms of analysis, all of you know what that means. And really in our type of writing, what your analysis should consist of is some very, the 5 W's or 6 W's from reporting, the who, what, where, how, when, that kind of thing. That's really what we're doing in our analysis at a minimum. At a minimum, any of our members should be able to pick up a BA, a bill analysis that my staff has written, which is usually, 2-3 pages on most bills. They should be able to pick that up, and by looking at the executive summary paragraph at the very top, they should be able to know on the fly if they should be for or against that bill on the vote. And that can be very, very important. You are playing a critical role when you write the bill analyses, because time is our biggest commodity, right? It's the one that none of us have. And members, that's patently true. And so they lean on those staff analyses heavily to decide whether or not they're going to vote for or against. And you have an opportunity in your analysis to go beyond just who does it help, who does it hurt, what does it cost, why do we need to do this now, you can really get in deeper down into the analysis. You have a lot of ability to really unpack complicated ideas and try to present them in a very abbreviated form. And that is an art. That is a skill. And you develop that skill over time. I don't expect anyone their first session to come in here and write VAs that just blow everybody away. I mean, I would hope, and that'd be great. But I think it takes 2 or 3 sessions to really develop your own style of writing within the needs that we have. The last thing that I would say on analysis is, and I've been trying to really reinforce this with my staff, is to think about your personality. Think about your skills and think about even your weaknesses. But when you look at coming into this world of policy and finance, you are not only just helping us move paper by policing the procedures are correctly followed and that we write clearly, all that's true. But you also have an opportunity with your personality, with your unique vision and perspective and background. You can enliven a debate in countless ways. You can inform a very serious debate in countless ways. Think about it. Education. All of us have gone through it. You wouldn't be on this call if you didn't believe in education, higher education, and pursuing education. And when you think about it, all of us understand that we could work with a bill like that in education, as an example, where we have a lot to offer. We have a lot to offer. And really the trick of a good analyst is being able to meld the two, your experiences, your background, without prejudicial determinations, but just your experiences to inform that debate, help members think more more in depth about a certain aspect of a bill they're working on. I just cannot tell you how often the staff analysts will help inform, shape, and improve legislation. In the committees, I'll leave most of this to James. The tech review staff unit, the lawyers are primarily responsible for parliamentary procedure. After you've been on staff for a while, the kind of the legacy trend has been to, eventually you may be in committees without an attorney, is my point, but maybe not too. So they are primarily responsible, but that doesn't mean that my staff, even in that case, it shouldn't be watching the procedure. It takes a lot of people to watch a room full of 17 legislators who, by the way, are not agreeing and are arguing in front of TV cameras and bright spotlights to make sure that everything that is happening goes according to process and procedure. So it's very important we have lots of eyes on and that we assist that lawyer if they're in there, running the parliamentary procedure, that we point things out to them that we see as well. Floor debate is probably my favorite aspect of analyst work. When you go down to the House floor, there's a reverence, there should be, it looks like a cathedral on purpose. And the other night I mentioned to you all the Pence town hall. One of the things that he said that resonated with the crowd, and it was a bipartisan crowd, was the lack of civility in government today. And I want to spend just a moment on it. Pam, tell me if I'm going too long. But here's the thing. We are so polarized as a country right now. It's hard for us to talk to the opposition on both sides of us. It's hard for us to talk civilly to each other. On the national scene, you see that. You saw it in Illinois during the Rauner administration in spades. That was a tough 4 years for everybody involved. And I'm mentioning this with floor debate because when you go to the floor, you're not supposed to ever be on the microphone. You are there to assist your member, right? But when that member gets questions, it can be like, if you took the LSAT or when you took your ACT, you get deer in the headlights just by the shock of the moment, and especially our newer members. And we can easily forgive them. They're speaking in front of all their peers, some of whom have been in the legislature for 20 years. This is their first bill, and they're answering questions that are designed to be a little tough. They're coming from the other side. And we want that, right? We want our bills to go through hell. In committee, that's where I prefer it happen. But even on the floor, because that's how we get good legislation, right? Compromises that sharpen a bill and tone down the ill effects. So floor debate is very public facing, and your member will really establish a relationship with you, very similar to those that work the other side of the world and are in the political arena. You know, when they're out there with a member, that they develop a very strong bond. And I think that that's what happens to us, particularly in floor debate and also in one-to-one conversations with a legislator about their bill or about a bill that they oppose in their office. You really do get a relationship that will pay dividends for, you know, the next 30 years if you stay around this building, because this building is powered by relationships. Two things really, relationships and honesty. Now, I'm not telling you everybody in this building tells the truth, but I am telling you that those that don't get weeded out. It may take a while, not most often not, but they will get weeded out. And when you are in this world, it is very, very important that you realize that. How you treat people, the relationships you make, and that your word is your bond. And if you don't know something, you admit that. You never guess as an analyst. You just tell the member, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to your question, but I will find out and I will come back to you. Subject matter hearings are very much like our committee work, except we're not voting on anything, right? We're just talking about subject matter. So we're getting information before the committee, and those are fascinating. And, you know, I remember my first or second year, Lou Lang had a medical marijuana bill. And I'm a real advocate of medical marijuana. And one of the reasons was because there was a young couple that came from Denver, Colorado, I think, and they were testifying in this subject matter hearing. And ladies and gentlemen, they told us in that room that day that their daughter was having something like 100 seizures a day before being administered medical marijuana. After it, it fell to something like 7 or 8. Now, I have 5 kids. And I looked around that room, and it was hard to find a dry eye in the room, because that little girl and her parents, you could just see the absolute pain they were in. And so I think that's illustrative of 2 things. These subject matter hearings really educate all of us, but they also give you the opportunity to see how, when we're up here late at night drafting some paragraph, it has real effect and real meaning on people's lives. Let's go to appropriations negotiations. That's what appro work is. It's a negotiation. It's a contract. It's a sale. And the governor will introduce his perspective. I guarantee you the House GOP have their ideas, and then House Dems do. And what's really interesting to me is, if I look across the aisle to the Republican side of the room, I see one thing right away, a similarity. There's a lot of similarity in the members. If I look on our side, there's a lot of diversity. And as the speaker says, we are strong through our diversity. Our diversity is what makes us strong. And that's because we get all sorts of viewpoints from within our own caucus even. You know, the Republicans tend to see things largely similarly. But depending on which sub-caucus you're in as a Democrat, and whether you live in the city or a suburb or downstate, you know, you will have a different perspective and your needs will be different. And so the appropriations process of drafting that bill takes about 3 months, because we are negotiating almost everything in it. I mean, not everything, you know, I mean, there are some things we pay for year after year, but we massage a lot of those, and we are constantly facing new pressures. Think about COVID.
Mark,
Yep.
Mark,
Yep.
can wind up.
Yep. So sorry. So here's my last pitch. You will not make a mistake working in this field. And if you work in this field and you excel, you can go to any of the 50 and nationally and work very well, because this is one of the 3rd largest budgets in the United States. Thank you.
I missed John. So could you give us some time to talk about the clerk's office?
Sure, and I will be very brief with this. You kind of see the names of the categories we have with clerk's office. But I think the thing I want to stress to people is I know a lot of people here probably saw the social media from House Democrats, and that's probably why you're here. My office is a bipartisan office, so we have Democrats, we have Republicans, we have independents, we have people who haven't decided what they might be. So if you're a part of those latter categories, I'm not certain which political affiliation you might have. My office would be a good place for you to work. We are the record keepers of the House. We also provide all the general back services, kind of like the janitors and post office that we have listed there. So what we really do is try to work together with everyone, serve all 118 members, and make sure that their legislative agendas go forward as they wish. And I think that's all I have to say, Pam.
Okay, thank you. James Hartman, our Chief Counsel.
Thank you so much, Pam. And Mark, you are a hard act to follow, but in a way, I think you're sort of an easy act to follow because so many of the traits and conditions and working items that you described for the Research and Appropriations Unit are also true for the Technical Review Unit. Our official name is the Technical Review Unit. It dates back to when our responsibilities were more narrow and simply reviewing the technical final phase of the bill to make sure that there were no problems. But I'll get to it on the next slide. Our responsibilities have expanded to sort of work with all the units. I'll start, here we go. You know, instead of my picture there, it could have been a picture of like the bill from Schoolhouse Rock, because we essentially are involved in the whole gamut of the legislative process. So what does our unit look like? We have, you know, between approximately like 14, 15 attorneys at any given time, including myself, pictured as our deputy counsel, Kendra Piercy. And then each year at session time, we staff up and all of our attorneys start as contractual attorneys. So it's a 7-8 month contract, which they participate in a full session. And then after that session, sort of a determination is made. Some people want to stay. Some people are able to use that experience and go off and join law firms, join the Attorney General's office, become Senate President. Anything you're interested in, sort of our alumni have used their experiences here as a jumping off point. Our backgrounds, you know, very frequently, at least half of our staff at any given time are probably fresh out of law school. It's sort of a first job for them after, you know, getting their JD. But, you know, we also, as Mark stated, diversity is our strength. So, you know, like Kendra, for example, was a tax attorney at a consulting firm before she joined. Myself, I started my career as a prosecutor in Cook County and was, you know, extremely frustrated being a line state's attorney, kind of implementing policy and not being involved in the process. And particularly at the time, I didn't like the bail process. And so joining staff, I've been lucky enough to be someone who's been involved in the bail reform question. So that's kind of one of the things that I like to tell people about, because one of the great parts about all of these positions you're hearing about today is the ability to participate in, you know, the policymaking and political process, and to, you know, be in the room where it happens and have a say. And, you know, you're not the legislator, you're not speaking on the floor, you're not the one, you know, voting, but you are providing guidance, you are providing input. So, you know, we have attorneys that a couple of years ago, we had an attorney who spent an entire career on the implementation side of energy policy. And finally, you know, took a job here and had an opportunity to sort of work on the forming that before the implementation. So attorneys of all walks and stages of their career are welcome in our office and provide valuable opportunity. Education, you know, obviously we are the attorneys, so you do have to have a JD and you have to be bar certified in Illinois. Locations and travel, much like Mark's unit, we do have offices in the Capitol. We are on the 6th floor. You know, all of our contractual beginning attorneys have to start here, and, you know, Capitol is where the action is, as Mark alluded to. We do also have some offices in Chicago. You know, some of our attorneys are based permanently in Chicago and come to session, come down to Springfield just on session days, but that's a cross that bridge when we come to a conversation with our staff. Working conditions, Mark basically covered all of this. You know, in the summertime, very much, you know, 9 to 5 in Chicago, 4:30 or 8:30 to 4:30 in Springfield. But during session, it's longer hours, fast pace. Every day kind of looks different. Maybe you're running to a committee, maybe you're helping draft legislation, maybe you're on the floor assisting in debate. A committee might not even start till 5:30. So that's sort of what the general schedule looks like and how the environment is. Traits of an effective council. I'm gonna steal some of Mark's actually. I love his truth to power. Definitely true for our staff as well. Someone may come to you very excited about an idea, and you have to be like, I'm sorry, that's unconstitutional, or that there may be a problem here, or the example he gave of when staffing a committee, it's going quickly, do pass 5-4, the bill passes, let's go, and you have to be like, whoa, hold up. The correct parliamentary procedure was not followed. We have to go back, and you just kind of have to be comfortable knowing that we've trained you in the right rules. It's your responsibility and your role to be the one who, tells that person that there may be a problem with their bill, or tells that person that you have to go back and re-vote on a bill because the proper procedure wasn't followed. Attention to detail. Obviously, as an attorney, when we're drafting the bills, you have to have, fine-tooth comb, making sure that there are no possible mistakes, sound legal reasoning. The ability to communicate complex information is definitely a big one. So when it comes to legal writing, and Mark alluded to it with bill analysis, but for lawyers, it's a little different because lawyers are trained to sometimes write in flowery motion language, sometimes write very technical legal documents. And, our staff has to draft, we split the bills up with the research and appropriation unit. They obviously take all the appropriations related, anything involving math, we stay away from, but anything involving complex legal detail, they stay away from. But so what our drafter, our analysts have to do when they're doing these BAs is making sure that a member who's not an attorney, and we have attorney members, but for the most part, they're not, can pick up the analysis and read it, in a minute before they vote on a bill and feel comfortable that they know what the bill is about. But at the same time that, another attorney or one of the member attorneys is able to pick up that analysis and, get the answers to the more confusing, more complex legal questions that they may have. So it's a fine line that they have to toe with their legal writing, but it's a skill that we teach. And there's one thing I forgot to include here, which is a comfort level with making mistakes and an openness to learn and sort of think on your feet. No one goes to law school learning how Illinois House parliamentary procedure. They don't train our bill analysis writing and legal writing. We train you on all of that. And you just have to be comfortable knowing that you may make a mistake. You may have allowed the wrong words to be used in a parliamentary practice. And if we catch it, that's fine. We can always fix it. If bills can have amendments, bills that are passed can have trailer bills. But you have to be comfortable knowing and admitting that you made a mistake, and just kind of open to the process and open to learning. It kind of falls back on something they tell you in law school. They don't always teach you law, they teach you how to think. And it's that type of thinking that we want for our attorneys on staff. So if we go to the next, just very quickly, as I said, it's sort of the entire how to become a bill process. Starting at the beginning, our legislative unit will, work with us, and we'll work with them to come up with ideas that members may want for drafting. We will assist the members in actually drawing up the bill. As Mark alluded to, there is a nonpartisan unit that does drafting for us if we want, but we can often do most of the work for them or let them do 90% and take it across the finish line. After a bill's been drafted, we split all the bills with the research and appropriations unit and analyze all the bills, which is kind of crunch time at the beginning of session for us. Committee work, we serve as the parliamentarians. And as Mark alluded to, some committees don't necessarily have an attorney on it, but they'll call us, they'll double check, and we'll assist in making sure that the bills get through committee properly and all the correct procedures are followed. And then finally, at the end, floor debate, which is my favorite part. And it's, you've worked this bill from the beginning. There's probably 1-2 people max in the entire state that know that bill better than you. You're standing with the member and they're using you as their key resource on the floor when there are tough questions. And everyone knows that you're the expert there on the floor assisting them. And then truly the best part of that is, it's a bill you've been working on for a long time. You're there for the vote, and then you're there with the members to celebrate when hopefully and usually your bill passes. So, at the bottom, we do serve as parliamentarians, and the last page, the picture of my deputy Kendra, that was her serving as a parliamentarian on the floor. One of our staff members is always at the dais with the speaker of the day and the House clerk, making sure that the proper procedures are followed on the floor. And then just at the bottom, in addition to all of our sort of processes in moving the bill along, issues will come up that people are interested in. The kind of the best example would be like over the summer when Roe was overturned with the Dobbs decision. A lot of the members wanted to know exactly what that decision said, how far they were going with trying to set up taking away future rights. And so things like that, our staff does memos for, and just sort of assisting all the other units where they may need a lawyer. So our comm staff may be working on talking points on a complex bill that's very legally complex, and they want to make sure that something's being said correctly. So we might work with them just to make sure that it's being communicated correctly legally, or our legislative staff who's helping come up with ideas or helping members with their bills will assist them. And then obviously we work closely with the research unit on the analysis and committee work. So thank you for that.
Thank you, James. And our next speaker is Stephanie Miller, and she'll talk about the legislative unit.
I apologize for the lighting. It appears the sun has moved since we started our program. I'll be very brief and pretty much echo a lot of what James and Mark have already said. The legislative unit has 20 to 25 legislative coordinators, 5 to 7 senior legislative coordinators, whom those legislative coordinators report to. Myself as the operations manager, we also have a director over our unit. Much like they've said before, the backgrounds, an undergraduate degree is expected for the role. However, it doesn't have to be poli-sci. We do kind of deal with a vast majority of everything that happens. We are essentially the backbone. You've talked about the technical process, and we've talked about research. We're where the ideas come from. A lot of what we do is brainstorming with members in our own unit about how to build the legislative platform. What are the kind of ideas that will support your constituency better? And that is a lot of what we do during the downtime. Our offices are in Springfield. We do have a few in Chicago, much like James said. That's kind of, as we get to it, we can discuss it. Regular working conditions, as we've said, we've got, much like those two units, we are in the Stratton building just across from the Capitol. So not as swanky, but still also very nice. General schedule, it's 8:30 to 4:30 when we're not in session, but much like the other directors have mentioned, when we are in session, the schedule is exceedingly flexible. We start a little bit earlier, our days are much longer. We are pretty much here to support the members and essentially the legislative calendar, what committees may come up, what happens on floor debate. As James mentioned, sometimes committees don't actually start till much later in the afternoon and or evening, and we are here to be of support for them. Traits of an effective legislative coordinator, all of these are great. But I think something that the other directors have also mentioned is the truth to power component. A lot of it has to do with potentially committee work. Our legislative coordinators are assigned to committees, and process is very important. So you being able to say, hey, actually, that's not the right, we don't actually have a quorum, we don't have the right amount of members on the call, or whatever that is, if that was a specific witness that was giving testimony, to be able to engage and speak up on behalf of the chairman or what have you, so that we have a clear and accurate record is very important. Also, as we're considering brainstorming, ideas that come up, just because it's a great idea doesn't mean it's legal or will be beneficial. So being able to actually articulate on behalf of the member and potentially the caucus is very important. We also actually are the forward-facing office for the legislature. So while we are also brainstorming and doing staffing of committees, we also are the offices that receive guests, advocates, lobbyists, and things like that. So occasionally we will have visitors that may be very adamant about seeing members or adamant about scheduling appointments or things like that. And we have to be able to advocate on behalf of the member and say, actually, I'm sorry, whatever that looks like, to be able to support the guest, but also know that if you didn't have an appointment, we actually can't see you at this time. And being comfortable enough to know what your actual role is Yes, you're a constituent potentially, but we do have a process and a procedure, and we do our best to try to train and help people advocate for themselves and the members and articulate in a way that makes it really easy for us to continue the work of this great state. I think there are duties on the next slide.
Steph, can I move to
Wrap it up for
David?
me? You sure
Yeah,
can.
yeah, move to David just to have a conversation about the communications unit. David?
Hi, how's everyone doing? My name is David Stevens. I'm a communications specialist in the speaker's comms unit. So if we want to advance the slide real quick, we have some information about our unit. So there are currently 5 communication specialists. We sometimes have more than that. We are people with bachelor's degrees and backgrounds in political science, communications, journalism, that sort of thing. Many of us, the majority of us, are located in Springfield. We do have a few folks up in Chicago. However, there is an office there. The main office is in the Stratton building, which is next door to the Capitol. And then we are mostly like there's like other departments. There's a pretty stark divide between when the legislature is in session and not in session. When we're not in session, it's kind of like an 8:30 to 4:30, same as you've heard from other departments. When we are in session, we come in a bit earlier. We come in around 8, and while the members are here, we are here. And that's really how that works when we're in session. We don't we keep them staffed while they're working. The environment here is like, as you can see, today is not a session day, so I'm just wearing kind of nice casual. That's kind of how we are. It's pretty informal when the members are not here. However, we are business professional when the members are here. So that means like a suit and tie. So we do that. It's an environment where you've got colleagues around. You can ask a question. You can collaborate. You can get help with things. But it is also sort of a very independent job. We each have a certain set of members that we are primarily responsible for. Currently about 11 or 12 per specialist. And we're kind of like, what we do is we're pretty much their communications sort of quarterback. We're like the coordinator, their go-to person for any sort of outward facing or public facing communications needs. So we'll do things like, if we could jump to the next slide. We do things like press releases, other PR staples. We might occasionally, help them write an op-ed for the paper. We might do any kind of things like that. We help with social media. We do posts. We do graphics. We do social, even just like social media posts. We will often get inquiries and field inquiries from the local media, or even state, national media. I think one of my members was once interviewed by a news program in Canada, and we helped her with that. We'll develop targeted messaging. So like if there's a certain issue or issue area or piece of legislation that they're trying to promote or even argue against, we will help with that. They're like, oh, I want to promote this law. I want to, effectively counter this argument that so-and-so made. We can help with that. We're, developing communications materials. So that could include brochures. It could include, like, as I said, press releases. It could include even talking points. Sometimes if they're going to give remarks, they'll want talking points or even a speech written. We do a little bit of speech writing from time to time. Developing and executing strategic communication plans for the members. As I said, we're kind of like the quarterback. We run offense and defense, and we will kind of assess what's going on in the members' district, who are the major stakeholders there, who are the influencers in their district, who are their friends, their nemesis, their the various press outlets, and we'll sort of synthesize all that data and kind of come up with a plan to help that member get their message out to their constituents. Building relationships with local media. That's something I already mentioned. We are often the point person for interview requests, requests for comments, requests for a quote, and we will help them come up with that material. And with some members maintain their own websites and social media presences, but with other members, they like to have staff, sort of coordinate that for them. So there are, as I said, there are currently 5 of us, communication specialists. We also have 2 people on our creative/design team, people who will do graphic design, people who will do, brochures and things like that. We also have a photographer and a videographer who do that sort of thing. And then we also have people who are in charge of like direct mail, people who are in charge of getting things printed and mailed out, and maintain a database of that, so that we can efficiently conduct a mailing campaign. Those are the sorts of positions we have. Someone did ask about internships, and internships do exist. I don't know off the top of my head whether there are any available right now, so that would be something to reach out to us about if you're interested, and we can handle that or we can work with you on finding what may or may not be available. The people we're kind of looking for, you have to be a self-starter. You have to be able to work independently. Strong, very, very strong writing skills are a must. You will need to be very persuasive, both written and verbal. You'll need to be able to, kind of keep a cool head when things get hectic, because, sometimes it's not always very crazy around here, but sometimes it can get crazy, and when it rains, it pours. So it's necessary to be able to kind of roll with the punches and, just keep a cool head when the pressure's on. Proficiency in social media is a big plus. If you're good at Instagram, good at Snapchat, good at Facebook, good at what have you. There's a lot of, there's new social medias popping up every other week now, it seems like. And you need to have a strong interest in state government politics and policy. That is really helpful and asset, because part of what we have to do is take these complicated and wonky and really complex ideas and jargon and legislative concepts and boil them down into something that is understandable by a layperson. We know a lot of people will do highly technical writing, but it's our job in the communications department to take highly technical stuff that other people have written, and often we have to repackage it so that a person with the average reading level of a voter can understand it. And so that's a helpful skill to have, to be able to kind of cut right to the main idea and be able to rephrase things that in more simple terms without that loss of essential meaning. We will coordinate quite often with tech review, with research and appropriations. They are our kind of go-to people if we have questions that are in their wheelhouse, and so we have them on speed dial, as well as the legislative department, because we are sort of the right and left hand. The legislative coordinator and the communication specialist are sort of like counterparts. Not even sort of, we are counterparts in staffing our members and making sure that they have what they need to do the best job for their constituents that they can. Let's see. Oh, so there's some questions in the sidebar. I just want to make sure that any of those apply to me. Yeah, there is a stark difference between the number of staff or the number of members that a communication specialist and a legislative coordinator will staff. There's generally 2 to 4 for an LC and 11 to 13 for a communication specialist, and that's really just dependent on how many total members there are, because everybody needs to have the ability to reach out to staff for communications needs. That is really all that I have. If there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll, or you can call or email me. I see that Daniel went ahead and reposted my contact information there. Feel free to reach out, and hope to meet some of you.
Okay. They've given us a few more minutes, so if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box and we will answer for you. Any questions? Any thoughts? Do we have any remote positions? At this time, we have, or should I say, we're not recruiting for remote positions. No, we don't. Other thoughts? What we're recruiting for now, I'm trying to think, is everything in Springfield? Yes. I think that we have anything in Chicago, and no, we don't. Everything we're recruiting for now is here in Springfield. Any other thoughts or concerns, ideas? Okay. Well, on that note, certainly you have our contact information. How long is the hiring process? Depends on the role. We are actively recruiting most of our positions right now, so we will be very attentive and move that process fairly quickly. So yes, everything we're recruiting for now, it's active. We're moving along on everything at this moment. Any other thoughts or concerns? So all of our openings are on our ILGA website, so please feel free to reach out there. If you have any other questions, you can certainly find me or the contact person on the job posting to give you some more information and data. We appreciate your time here in listening to what we have to offer here at the House of Representatives. And again, thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thank you so much for emceeing the event, Pamela. And just a few things that I want to go ahead and note here for our job seekers on the line. Just an FYI, as I stated at the beginning of the presentation here, we have recorded the session. So if there's any information that you need to go back and refer to prior to submitting those applications, we will be posting that within 48 hours or so at the conclusion of this event on the Illinois WorkNet YouTube channel under the Virtual Job Fairs playlist. Additionally, if you registered for this event, I will be forwarding your contact information along to the folks that we partnered with here today. So just know that they will be receiving that information as well. And as you see throughout the session here, a lot of folks posted their contact information directly into the chat, so feel free to reach out accordingly. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and, of course, a great weekend and a fantastic Thanksgiving holiday. Take care, everybody.